Hello, I'm Sepali and I'm from Sri Lanka. And I'm here as the last speaker for 5-day conference, and I know you are all satisfied and exhausted. And I will be very quick in my presentation as and also I was while I'm doing the Oscar speech of thank you Bani and thank you Arthur, but actually I'm here because of Bani's unique ability to persuade from thousands of miles away through various means. Because I don't know if that I'm not coming because I have loads of children and a husband recovering from illness, etc. And a beautiful woman, I said, no, I can't. And then she said all kinds of vile things to me. And she continued to say vile things nicely to me. So anyway, I decided that for my survival in South Asia, it's good that I do. But I am indeed honored that I'm the last person in this conference. And I think what I will do is I will try to sort of take you through as comprehensively and fast as possible to the way in which women's organizations have been able to articulate women's concerns. And I also am troubled and sort of concerned and sometimes inspired as to whether we have a women's movement or not. But I know definitely that women move together on certain issues, and therefore there's a women's movement. That's been the more evident, I suppose, articulation of women's concerns is where issues, women have come together on particular issues and have been very articulate and prominent over those issues. But let me tell you very briefly. Now, when we look at Sri Lanka, I think the way in which we conceive women's organizations, probably the first women's organization that came up was the Mahila Samiti in the early 20th century. And then subsequently we had what is called the All Summer Women's Conference. Now these organizations that have come not on the basis that there is a general discrimination against women, but these are organizations that have come out on concern for women's welfare, very much welfare oriented. And I think it's the 1970s, in the late 1970s, women's organization, which was the Voice of Women, set up by Kumari Jayawardena, and the first really the organization that took a very strong feminist perspective. That was in the 1970s. Now there are various organizations that are coming up and disappearing and working on different issues. But late 1970s is marked by the emergence of a feminist perspective. The 1980s saw, I think, a flourishing of organizations much more focused on politics of women's rights, women's issues, and feminism. And when we look back at the 1980s, I think it was a period of really flowering of women's organizations in terms of being very strong, articulating very strongly women's needs and issues. At the same time, the late 1980s was a period of tremendous political turmoil with a lot of political violence. We have the war in the north and the east, and sort of a semi-insurrection period between state and non-state party. It's a party, and lots of disappearances and killings, and this really had an impact on. Women's groups also had to literally suspend because people were being killed in different parts. Women had to move out of those areas into what we call considered safe areas. So 1988, 89, 90 actually was a very troubled period where we didn't find so many issues that so many organizations coming together. There are few who kept on working. And in the 1980s we had Women Action Committee, which took out a lot of extremely serious and extremely important issues for Sri Lankan in general and Sri Lankan women in particular. We also saw the period of escalation of the war, the murder of prominent Tamil woman activist, Rajini, and I think there was a general display of the solidarity between women's groups in the north and the south during this period, which we have not seen since. It's something that we need to take note of. The 1980s saw the emergence of the Mothers' Front in Jaffna for the mothers of people killed in the conflict, and late 1980s, early 90s, the Mothers' Front in the south, which came about as a result of the disappearances that were taking place in the south of the country. Now, the Mothers' Front in the north, was very effective for a short period of time, and then it could not actually survive within the LTT-controlled Jaffna Peninsula. A lot of those people left and came down south of it. But it is an important, I think, point. That's a nice word, but I think, in the women organizing and women's movement. In the south, the Mothers' Front that came up in the south actually was orchestrated. It came up quite naturally because of the chaos and terrible trauma that families are suffering when their children, when their mostly male children or the fathers disappear. And women started going from place to place to look for the bodies. And very similar, I think we had a discussion in the morning today that you don't have a body, you can't get a death certificate, you can't get any kind of state assistance. And it was another government was in power, the one that was basically responsible with the other non-government group for the killings and disappearances. So the women started going to find some way in which somebody is going to help them articulate their needs. And it was opposition that two male politicians in the opposition who really helped them. And they were able to mobilize the women. So it's a very interesting, I think, development of women actually coming together for their concerns, but being supported by male politicians. And to some extent, after 17 years, we had elections and the government was toppled and the new government was elected. And to some extent, the Mothers' Front has a part to play in the overthrow of the previous regime. So, the 1980s and early 1990s, I think, was a period which was packed with all kinds of different aspects of women's activism. So we come to the 1990s, and I think people were picking up the pieces literally. Women's groups were coming together again, going back to their places where they used to work, starting up to organize once more. And probably, I think, in my view, the advent of the Beijing conference had the impact of bringing women's groups together again. And a lot of these groups had not necessarily been involved with each other, but they came together through a long process, and then they went Beijing and came back. But what's interesting is that since they came back, they have been able, I think it's also probable that lots of them were exposed for the first time to the international to the issue of international aspects of women, the issue that they want to talk about, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's rape, whether it's reproductive rights, whatever. It was not something that actually only they were talking about, but it's something that the South Asian other countries were talking about as well. So I think that had an impact. But they have been working together, coming together on different issues. So I think I would say that while we have had demonstrations, we have had women-led strikes in the free trade zone now. Again, another aspect I forgot to tell you was, if we look at the 1980s, 1970s and 1980s, with all that I told you, it was also a period where women became the major income earners in the mainstream areas such as the free trade zones, the migrant workers to the Middle East, because although domestic labor in Sri Lanka, domestic workers are in the informal sector, once they migrate out to work, then their money becomes immediately stashed into the formal sector, so they become an important category of people who are whose remittances matter. And of course, the plantation women workers. So there are three categories of women workers who it became very clear actually were holding basically the economy together by their earnings. So you have to place the way the macroeconomic changes also were part of the way in which women came together to articulate their concerns. Now, another thing is that a lot of the organizations then that came together in the post-1995 period were from the rural sector. These organizations have been working on women's issues for many years. Some are from a welfarist perspective, some are from taking on the economic aspects, and some actually from feminist perspectives, but not necessarily using words like feminism, but these are the working through such issues. And so post 1995, I think the ways in which women's organizations have been able to sort of push for their demands have been through traditional methods like demonstrations. And so you have them come together. And I was quite, I think it was earlier who said how the left and the women's movement that we look to the left parties. But at some point I myself realized that whenever there's been a left strike or whatever, women's groups have actually gotten supported. But when women have been on the street for rape, you don't see a single left party person, males, maybe women, they never fight the place. So we are standing there in the burning sun, when a journalist has been attacked or whatever, but they do not come to our issue. So I was quite, mad about that. Well, I still am. Anyway, so we had, traditionally we use posters as many of us do in South Asia. We have publications, and as all of you already know, Sri Lanka has a high literacy rate, whatever you need. At least people can read something. And I would think that one of the interesting impact of women's activism has been the fact that the media, while continuing to display the more sexist advertisements and largely biased reporting, has, however, there's a clear sort of pattern of media picking up issues and not necessarily all the time is missing. Because earlier we could really find very few instances where mainstream media would take a women's issue and have, we have women and leisure in the newspaper, but now it has become gender. The daily news now has a gender thing. So we always jump at to see what the gender is about. So they're talking something about how to keep your nails good, but there are, usually domestic violence is a good thing to have there. And, but it's not, it's changed. I think there's a marginal, but there's a noticeable change. I think Anuma is there, so she can always, she's the media person. So she can add or deduct from what I say. Then the question, the issue of state interventions. Now, of course, prior to Beijing was we formulated the National Women's Charter, and it was initiated by the government then in power, and it was with women's NGOs representatives who wrote the Women's Charter basically. Radhika was there, and Surga was there, and all of us had together, and that the state just gave us the rule, but it goes to the state. There's a national plan of action. Everybody has to make a national plan of action after Beijing. So, lo and behold, the Minister of Women's Affairs also formulated the national plan of action, which again was basically written more by the women's NGO people than others. Now, again, I think the issues that are being raised here today are also very important to consider as to how far do we work with the state and what kind of state and what do we expect of the state. And this is a question that I am just going to leave because I have also been asking the same thing because we've asked lots of things from the state. We expect it to provide, and at the same time we are constantly criticizing, and I think we are really not very clear as to what it is that we are asking for. What is it except that not what is bad and what is there. So anyway, we had that kind of linkages that were being formed. And another area which I think women's groups were quite influential in upsetting people was in the area of political parties. Because while we have been, few women have gone into mainstream politics, and Rumi is an example of that, who has contested in elections, few women. Late 1990s saw an organized attempt to raise the issue with the political parties. Where are the women? Through advertisements, through newspaper ads, and through discussions. To say, why are you not having women in your political, in your parties? And this has not had the, of course, I would not to report that, my God, now they are running around and they're finding women to put in. They're not. But they were made quite uncomfortable, I think, by that. By the fact that these constant questions were coming up, and that that it came in the mainstream media, because always alternative media, alternative to mainstream that is, and women's organizations would have raised the issue anyway. But it came in mainstream media and it came in face-to-face discussions. So we have an interesting situation now. The government in power, which is led by a woman, they're not terribly interested in women's issues. But the opposition, which was the one that pushed the Women's Charter through as well, right now they are extremely keen to talk to us about what are the issues that we want pushed. We will push it. And now we are in a position of saying, hold it. We don't want them to pick up our issues and then get shut down because the other side was like what this side is, So we don't want to get caught in the middle of what they're doing. What political parties mean to each other. We right now are in the process of trying to figure out how to move within this minefield as we put. But there's an area where I think through the organizations that came together in the post-Beijing phase, and with whom I think there's a lot more sharing of information, issues such as domestic violence and legislation against domestic violence has emerged. And right now there is a draft that is being formulated. And again, it's a case when do we move in to push that thing through or to introduce it? Okay. I think also where the women's groups have been increasingly articulate is on the issue of peace. Because it's very, we've been at war for 20 years in the north and the east. Of late, it's been, I think, women's organizations have been more concerned that the issue of women's involvement in peace initiatives should be recognized. And I think for Women's Day this year, lots of women's organizations did various things, much more than maybe 10 years ago. Lots of newspapers, the media actually reflected some of these activities as well, much more than 10 years ago. So that's part of the result of, I think, years of activism. But this year, most of the organizations that actually did celebrate Women's Day took up the theme of the war and the need for peace. And I think that's becoming a very critical area. Of course, the government is also talking peace, but we have been talking peace every now and then for a long time at the level of the state. But I think women's organizations, even though we are still not saying that we are now got a ear to the political hierarchy, but amongst organizations, we had for example, one group had a meeting in the border villages between the north and the east, in Pakistan. And there were people organized, so that was women from the border, about 1,000 women came. But from the south, and particularly from the deep south, which is reputed to be very nationalistic in terms of single nationalism. People came, about 400 women traveled up to join in that celebration. So, and in another town in Badulla, similarly, the issue of peace was the prominent theme. So, and in Balangoda, again, the issues are economic issues and which have been of concern to women, but the issue of peace. Now, one of the results I think of, I feel that when we look back to see the impact of women's activism at the level of society, I would say that there is a backlash. There is a backlash because women are more prominent, women's issues get raised better, there has been publicity about the large number of rapes, incidents of domestic violence. These have been emerging in the press, and the backlash is women are out there working and earning income, and there's an impact on household relationships because of that, because men are not necessarily the only breadwinners in the country in the household in terms of cash, although we still regard the man as a head of the household. And backlash comes, I think part of this violence against women is part of the backlash. And periodically we have questions about women's dress. Now, government schools, girls' schools, now they're coming down with regulations saying that you cannot come in them. Lots of people living in the urban sector or the rural sector do not necessarily wear sari all the time. It would quite often they would wear a skirt and a blouse. Now the regulation that you cannot come, mothers, not fathers. Fathers can come in trousers as usual, not in sarong, but mothers must come in sari. The government's poverty alleviation program, which has millions and billions and trillions of money, and they are now, alleviating poverty. All the poor women have to go to the meetings twice a month, dressed in sari. Now that work, but they have to have a sari because lots of poor women don't have saris in Sri Lanka. They would borrow or whatever, but they have to get a blouse stitched and they have to do it. So to me, this is also part of some kind of trying to reclaim something, and it's coming from the state sector as well as other people whom I am not able to point my finger at directly. I mean, there have been attempts in the university from radical groups to say that women can't come in trousers and undresses and they have to wear, things, but that sort of went off. But this is more serious, the fact that with mothers to go to school have dressed and most of our children go to government schools. Then another aspect of activism, I think, is this constant question that we are confronted with. If something happened, what are you doing about it? What are your women's organizations doing about it? Yes. So, I must confess that I have now reached a point where I think I'm old and I have the right to be rude. So, I say to them, what are you doing about it? Yes. And as this is only a women's organization. Have you talked to civil, other so-called this, that? And I then proceed to question whether it is one, but it is a question that constant irritating. If you are a women's organization, you must be able to solve water problems. And other thing I think we could, well, it's an issue that I do not have an answer to, but when we do talk about empowerment, and we are, now the whole concept of empowerment has almost been taken, sort of zoomed out of our reach, because I don't know exactly whether it is income in your hand that's empowerment, the ability to make decisions that is empowerment, to not. Now, somebody told me that joining small savings groups, women, doesn't mean to empower, because have they gone to the hospital and demanded a better service? This is a man who asked me. So I sort of looked at him and I thought, yeah, I said, you have the left parties that have gone to the hospital and demanded a better service. When my patients come up and say, I want to, I said, it's a way in which one articulates one's demand. So for him, empowerment of women meant that they would go on once and demand a better service in the hospital. But I think it's important for us also to contemplate and think about it, to reflect on the ways in which women's organizations actually can develop or that's also can come together and collaborate. That's also
I'm getting the last word. I said I'm getting the last word, Murashika. That's what you think.
Because in terms of what it is that we are working for. And I must say, when I look back as far as the Sri Lankan women's movement is concerned, women's organization, women's movement is concerned, I do see that there has been a lot of interaction and a lot of collaboration. But I think, we sometimes expect ourselves also, and we should expect ourselves to do lots and lots of things, but we also have to be realistic in terms of what it is that we are trying to change. And sure enough, I think the changes are coming very slowly, very, very slowly. And we can look at it in terms of, okay, the new curriculum, the education curriculum will have a component on gender issues, which will insidiously try to work patriarchy into this. Because that was part of what the Center for Women's Research did, and the Ministry of Education has always accepted it. So one can work in different ways, but I think we still maybe need to sharpen our tools more. Thank you. And now I just